Folks, welcome back to another episode of the NYU GPH podcast. Today we have a dual episode yet again, but we're entering the world of environmental health, aka the world of environmental public health. And we have two amazing guests. We actually have a professor and a student who are very, very new to the program in different ways, one as a professor and one as a student. So we're going to hear two perspectives of what their GPA journey has been like, what attracted them to NYU, and you're going to get a masterclass in the world of environmental health. Welcome, Chloe and Abrania.
Thank you for having
Dr.
us.
Abrania Marrero, welcome to the NYU GPH podcast. How are you two doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm very excited to have you two, and I didn't want to butcher your introductions because I feel that the two of you have shared so many insightful things before we got started. So Dr. Abrania Marrero and Chloe, I'll start off with you, Dr. Marrero.
Like you said, my name's Abrania Marrero. I am currently a clinical assistant professor in the Department of Global and Environmental Health. That's a mouthful. But like you said, I just started in September of 2025 here at GPH. Before that, I was in a postdoc and a PhD in Harvard School of Public Health. And very excited to be here and to finally have a faculty position. It's been a long time coming.
Oh, we're excited to have you here and hear all about your experience so far. Chloe, please introduce yourself.
So my name is Chloe Dourmashkin. I am from New York, born and raised in Yonkers. I am a recent graduate of my bachelor's degree at Connecticut College, and I came straight here into my master's at NYU. I am an environmental health and sustainability, potentially, concentration. We're talking about the name, but I am an environmental health concentration for my MPH.
For those of you curious, the two of them have been in the NYU community for only one semester so far, so they're very, very new. We're going to get a very different perspective to what their journey has been like. And I have to ask, before the journey started, what attracted the two of you to the GPH community and the world of NYU in general?
I ended up at GPH for a couple different reasons. I think first and foremost for me was that I definitely wanted to be in New York City. And so that right there, NYU is a big resource for just being in New York City. It has access to so many networks and resources and so many different communities around New York. It's not just like Washington Square Park. It is a lot bigger than that. I wanted to do public health since my undergrad. I kind of fell into that tunnel through my anthropology and environmental studies degree, which neither were super related to public health, but I landed in like the mix of those two, and that was public health. And I really wanted a global perspective. I did not want to like look at public health from like a US perspective, especially when you're looking at environmental issues. I feel that no environmental issue can be looked at in a vacuum, especially like in a nation's vacuum. It has to be looked at a global perspective. So I really like that the GPH program is a global focused program that makes it very different from other MPHs.
Okay, so it was New York for you and
right.
the
global
holistic
focus.
global nature that this program offered
Absolutely.
at the time. And you made it.
Yeah, thankfully.
Of course. What about you, Dr. Marrero?
Yeah, I think Chloe spoke very well to GPH. I think I joined the Department of Global and Environmental Health. That is a department that is pretty unique to NYU GPH. Usually you'll have a global health department or an environmental health department in schools of public health. And that combination really appealed to me. The type of research that I do is related to climate change. It's related to the impacts of not just global and environmental change, but, social and political changes on nutrition and cardiometabolic health. And I focus most of my work in small island states, like those in the Caribbean and the Pacific. So as you can kind of see, if I'm interested about climate change, if I'm interested about these different regions, and I'm interested in health, then some department that is really trying to coalesce and bridge across these different fields is really doing something innovative. And so I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to be a part of kind of defining what global and environment means when it comes to faculty from those disciplines coming together. our global faculty are going to think about global governance, think about the UN, whereas our environmental faculty, you're going to think about risk assessment and toxicology and occupational health, and those things might be disparate, but the world of sustainability, the world of planetary health, the things we're both interested in, they need to be speaking, those fields need to be speaking better to each other. And I think I think I've kind of found my interdisciplinary home.
You're kind of like the interdisciplinary messenger for two different departments or two different worlds that haven't been communicating but need to communicate.
Exactly.
I have to ask this one thing because it was what I was most curious about before the interview. The word nutrition came up. And when I think of nutrition and climate change, we have heard different takes on it, but you are solely focused on this in quite a lot of depth. So I had to hear, what is your perspective when it comes to nutrition and environmental health? What is it? Where does this connection even come from? Yeah.
I love that. I think when people are interested in food and in climate, a very common kind of gateway is thinking about the impact that food systems have on the environment, right? We can think about how agriculture has really changed in the last 50 years towards industrial forms of agriculture, right? I'm sure this is a common story we might have been told since we were little, and how, monocultures or really large-scale livestock operations, how they contribute to tons of different environmental changes, whether that's greenhouse gas emissions, right, that lead to climate change, or land degradation, water pollution, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, that's the natural place where curiosities kind of lead, like thinking about, well, when we produce food, which we do for our nutrition, right, at the end of the day, that food is going to become nutrients for our bodies, we tend to have an environmental impact. I'm kind of interested in flipping the script. I'm interested in thinking about what are truly effective solutions that we can consider that is going to produce food that is still nutritious, that is still culturally relevant, that is still embedded in community, but that is actually also environmentally sustainable, right? And how, if we don't go down that path, how is climate change going to impact food production in a way that's going to result eventually into poor nutritional health outcomes, poor food insecurity, et cetera, et cetera. A very easy example might be if there are places in the world that are getting hotter, that they're experiencing extreme heat, they might not be able to grow the types of crops that they are used to growing, right? And so how is that change in landscape for agricultural communities going to manifest as food insecurity locally and potentially globally if they're kind of embedded in the global food system, right? So think about food systems, nutrition, lead to environment, but climate change also impacts nutrition. It goes both ways.
It's a big problem. It's almost like, how do we stay nourished without damaging the environment?
Exactly.
And make that sustainable for down the line.
Exactly. And how are environmental changes going to impact our
nutrition. I heard something from you, Chloe, in the beginning of your intro. I heard the new word sustainability coming up into your world. But I have to ask, what attracted you to the environmental program specifically? You're specializing in that at GPH, and you just started last semester.
I did. So my particular focus is on water, and that is a super, super broad topic, but I'm very interested in waterborne disease, clean water access. There's a lot of WASH programs that I'm very interested in pursuing.
What is a WASH program?
Water and sanitation and hygiene.
It's like programs through like the WHO and things like that. They pursue these WASH initiatives to help bring clean water. And WASH is kind of a fitting acronym for that. So I'm very interested in that. I've done a lot of like work experience studying water and harmful algal blooms and things like that. So there is so many avenues to go down with water. But that is definitely my main focus, and that has been such a key idea in so many environmental related classes, even in the foundations, in the core classes that everyone has to take in the MPH. There's so many ideas related to water that it's a little bit mind-boggling how everything has to do with water. And it's kind of related to food and the agricultural system, and how much water we use for agriculture and for other industries. That's a whole sustainability issue of water loss and water usage. So yes, broadly, water and sustainability related to water.
I have to ask the two of you this because I'm fascinated by something that just happened. Same world of environmental health, but different outcomes. Where did your interest come? So you were mentioning, Dr. Marrero, that I found this gap and I just could not stop looking into it. And I'm curious for both of you, where did the nutrition interest come in, and then where did the water interest come in?
Yeah, I really like that we're paired together in the same way that Chloe, I think, told me that, water is life. And to a real extent, that's the case. I come from this worldview that says that like food is life and like the fabric of our social and cultural existence. The way food was introduced to me largely comes from my grandmother in the form of love, right? Like I attached myself to the way she showed me love when I would travel to Puerto Rico, and she would make sure to call my mom and tell her, make sure you don't stop at any fast food places because we already have, the rice, beans, and chicken ready. And I've been preparing it since the morning, right? So please make sure to come. And I always say that I don't think I ever heard, my grandmother tell me the words like, I love you directly, or I love anyone directly. But like, I deeply know that she did because of the way she expressed it through food. And I think in our heart of hearts as public health professionals, especially those interested in nutrition, it's very easy for us to forget that, even though the way our daily bread, like our daily interactions is food, like with food, is as a cultural experience or as a social experience, but we tend to reduce it, right? We have food is medicine programs because we want to see the health benefits of food, right? And of course, in the ag space and the environment space, you can think of food as a crop, as a commodity, right? As a natural resource, right? So food, and indeed food has all of these, characteristics. Food is nutrition and therefore a kind of medicine, if you want to see it that way. It is a natural resource, right? But at the center of our experience with food, I think it truly is a cultural kind of facet of our life. And I think we need to remember that as public health practitioners, because the more we forget that, the more we're not going to make the changes that we want to see in the world as it relates to, positive nutritional health and food system sustainability. If we just keep telling people, stop eating meat because it's bad for the environment, and that's great. We're going to target a certain group of people that like that message. But most people are probably eating meat for reasons that have nothing to do with health or the environment, right? And how do you speak to that instead of just the health and sustainability dynamics? But yeah, that's
how your
why
journey
I'm into food.
Unlocked. It's almost like I love you, but I show you through feed you.
Exactly.
I feed you.
Exactly.
How beautiful.
Yeah.
You're speaking my language with the anthropology, food culture. That's totally what I learned in undergrad. And then I think that there is so much of that you could say about water and how things are centered around water. But I came to water in kind of a different way. It wasn't so much of a personal familial experience. I grew up going to the beach a lot. I mean, a lot of families do. And I always loved the beach, as many people do. But I was very fascinated by the water system as in like preschool and like elementary school when you learn about like, okay, the rain and then it, brings the waves and then it evaporates. I loved that stuff. I learned all about the clouds and whatever. And as you get older, you learn more about water and the water system and what it means and what are the water in our pipes doing. I had a small revelation when the Flint, Michigan crisis happened, and that like kind of changed my world on water a little bit, because before that it had been like swimming classes and beach and totally changed my perspective. In my very first semester of undergrad at Connecticut College, I met the pediatrician whistleblower at Flint, Michigan, who like stood in front of like the courts to say, and she held up this baby bottle full of dirty water. She said, "Would you give this to your kid?" Changed my world. It made me want to go into public health, just meeting her. It made me think about public health communication and how we can like actually deliver a message in a meaningful way using like symbols and like real things that is different from medicine and clinical textbooks and things like that. So that's how I got into public health water. And as you learn a lot more and you pursue that avenue, you realize how many more problems there are and how many more things you can talk about and how many more problems we've always had that we haven't been talking about. Like waterborne diseases have been around forever, and have I ever heard of it before, I was like in my undergraduate or graduate level degrees? Like, no, unfortunately. But these are not new problems. They're just increasing problems.
They're two different worlds, but they feel so connected at the same time. How, to someone listening and someone who might be interested, how would you describe the world of environmental health? What is this? What is this world to people that don't know about it?
There is a traditional, I mean archetypal way to think about it. Environmental health at its core is about identifying hazards, biological hazards, chemical hazards, physical hazards. And by hazard, I mean something that is toxic or potentially toxic. So does it have human health harms, right? But it's also about, okay, once we've identified a potential hazard, how and to what extent are we exposed, right? So does it go through land, through soils? If it goes through soils, that means it goes through food. Or does it go through waters, right? That's water contamination, water pollution, right? That's the exposure routes. Or does it go through the air? And that's when you think about, and maybe that we need a third person missing too to represent. That would be things like air pollution, right? So it's about hazards. It's about how human populations are exposed to those hazards through land, through air, through water, and how that determines risk. As you can imagine, that means that you can really have a conversation about absolutely anything. And you can think about all of the different contexts surrounding that very simple exposure outcome relationship to think about, well, what are the social dynamics? What are the political dynamics? What are the climate change dynamics that is going to influence who is more or less exposed, who is more or less vulnerable, right? I was just chatting with a student who has a project in Pakistan because there was some major flooding occurring in that region. And so that's water, right? And you could think to yourself, sure, there might be some contaminants in that flood water that families exposed to the flooding might be now, experiencing dermal exposure, right, on the skin contact, right? But there's, again, social, political, environmental context. You could ask yourself, well, who is able to live in floodplains or not, right? Is it that floodplains are potentially less expensive, and therefore inequities, socioeconomic inequities are going to drive who experienced that flooding or not? How is changes in climate impacting the likelihood of extreme weather events that lead to flooding, right? So it is simple in the sense that it's just a simple exposure outcome, and where are those exposures in the environment and what diseases do they lead to? But it's also like trying to step out and think about the bigger picture every and any time you're thinking about those dynamics. Is that helpful?
Yeah, it's very detailed actually, and I can see you have something to add.
Yeah.
Just related to what you were saying, I think that environmental health in general is really illustrated well by conceptual frameworks, which is something that comes up in nearly every class. In every, environmental related or public health related class, we talk a lot about conceptual frameworks where you can kind of map out, and everyone's conceptual framework in their head looks different. You can map out how everything is connected, like you were saying. It's the social determinants, it's the exposure here, it's the government policy here, it's the family you were raised in here, it's the neighborhood you were raised in. And you can there's so many different types of conceptual frameworks. I know in class, we all grouped together all over the room and drew out conceptual frameworks that all looked completely different of this is connected to this, is connected to this. And I feel like that's environmental health, is everything is connected, and you could look at it from so many different ways and so many different shapes. You could take a macro perspective, a micro perspective. You could start at the top, start at the bottom. So that's my idea of environmental health. It's very frameworks.
Yeah. That's a proud professor right here, because
it is though. That's what it is.
Reminding me of a specific classroom moment.
Yeah, that was that was very impactful, because you can see how many different ideas of the same thing there are.
You had a proud professor moment, and I want to know how you two even connected. Because we said that there's a student and a professor coming on the podcast today. How did this connection even happen?
Well, so we met on the first day of orientation. It was my first day stepping foot at NYU. We had a long day of different events and activities and presentations and PowerPoints and all sorts of things going on. One of them, it was the lunch break, where we got to break off into smaller tables and kind of meet with professors and faculty members in your actual concentration. So all the concentrations had split up at that point. And I remember you introduced yourself. You were trying not to be too intimidating as a professor. You wanted to just sit down and start chatting and be super casual about it. I appreciated that, because I didn't realize you were a professor at all until several minutes into the conversation. And then you were like, yeah, I'm teaching one of the classes. And I was like, oh my gosh, hi, my name is Chloe. And of course I was in your class. Global Environmental Health. I think I had it was the second day of class, and then we spent the whole semester together, and now we get another one.
Yeah, for sure. Chloe, maybe unbeknownst to her at the time, or I guess maybe you didn't know, since the orientation, they kind of said, this is the new faculty. But I think many of her classmates might not have known that it was my first teaching experience at NYU.
No, I definitely had no idea.
Generally. yeah. And so I think a lot of grace. I really enjoy the NYU student body, the MPH students. They're very engaged, and the first thing that comes to mind is curiosity. I think curiosity really kind of percolates through in the interactions that I have in the classroom. And it really just kind of creates an engaging, respectful kind of experience where we're learning from each other, right? That's something that's important to me, maybe, that I'm sitting down, and it's okay that you might not know that I'm faculty, right? Because I need to learn from you all as much as you have, I'm sure, a lot to learn in the classroom. Yeah.
And it also speaks to how the student body, especially in this program, is so diverse in backgrounds and ages, and there are people who've had full-fledged careers who are coming back to do this degree, and there are people who've just graduated, and we are all the same in that we bring so many different perspectives, and you can't really tell who's what or who's doing what or for why. Some people, this degree is a new career for them, and for some people this degree is just an addition to a really long career in public health that they've already had. So when you hear people talking just in classmates, it's, people are speaking from their experience, which is so interesting and important for people who don't have that public health experience like me. I don't have a career in public health yet. So it's exciting.
So these two worlds are connecting together, and you took Dr. Marrero's class. What was it like taking the class? And for you, what is it like as an instructor that now you are a CA for Dr. Marrero as well? So I'd love to hear that story.
I think global environmental health, or global environmental health as the course is called, is trying to do that interdisciplinary bridge that I was speaking to towards the beginning of our conversation, right? I want the students, all MPH students have to take this course, not just environmental health students. But I want them to be exposed to what environmental health might have looked like. So those are going to be topics like occupational health and safety, like heavy metals exposure, like risk assessment. But I also want to marry that with conversations around pollution, around sustainable food systems, around planetary health, urban health, microplastics, et cetera, et cetera. So we kind of design the course in a way that kind of looks and respects the past and where we've come from as a discipline, and also looks to the future. I think a lot of students that are kind of signing up for a concentration in environmental health within the MPH have sustainability at top of mind, and so we want that to be at top of mind too. How I brought Chloe in, she was a fantastic student in the fall. It was as simple as that. So maybe you could speak to your experience as a student.
So Dr. Marrero's class is a little bit different every time. We do something a little bit different. It's always a combination of more than one thing, obviously. It's always a little bit of lecture and conversations. We always start the beginning of class with like, so what did you think about the readings? What kind of topics do we want to talk about? And we like get to like list them out all on the board. So it always starts with an open conversation, and then it becomes a lecture where you're thinking critically and taking notes throughout. And then the class usually ends with some kind of like hands-on activity or debate or discussion, or we're all up at the board writing something, or we're like all Googling the same thing on our computer and like thinking about why we all got different things. I mean, I think that there were so many of those hands-on discussions that were so meaningful to me because that's how I like to learn. But because in the classroom we do so many different things in one sitting in the 2 hours, I feel like it really speaks to different like learning styles and different learning modalities. We were just talking about one of the activities that we did was we all were able to look online at this it was like a calculator, and it talked about, it calculated how many cigarettes you smoked based on the air quality of the location you were in, just like the equivalency of that air quality to cigarettes smoked. And we were looking at the address of, New York Global Public Health Building and other cities and other countries around the world, and just to like put that in your computer and like think about it and talk about it is such like a meaningful activity to do in class that you wouldn't necessarily do in other disciplines. And that was just like one example of, the different types of things we did every single time. It would be, like I mentioned before, the conceptual frameworks up at the board of like, how do you think about this social determinant of health and why does it impact, country level and individual level things? It'll be ethical debates, if you agree with this side, if you agree with this side, why? And so there was a lot going on. It was, and those types of experiences kind of stick with you. As I've been a CA now the next semester, I was telling you, I have like deja vu, but in like a new way where I get to like think again about the same ideas and like have new thoughts about them because there is so many more things to think about. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack. I feel like this class could go on forever, and it really should, because there's going to be so much more to learn every week. Yeah, and it does a really good job of like touching a little bit on a lot of important different topics. Yeah, like you said, everything from like urban health to air pollution to all different things.
For the listeners, what's a CA? What is a CA?
A course assistant.
Okay.
Yes. So a little different from a TA. A little different.
Quintessential what a TA would be, but you're more involved in the course experience, I would assume?
Yeah. Yeah. I do less of like teaching part. I can like answer questions and emails and stuff, but I don't like lecture or anything like that. I just help with like the backgrounds.
Yeah. I want to speak to two things that Chloe mentioned. I really I see a commonality in your interest in translating air pollution to cigarettes, and also the baby bottle full of dirty water.
Public health communication.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
That's me.
Yeah. And so
That
I
was my
think
senior thesis.
generally, exactly, I want to be able to offer students not only like a knowledge base. I think when we think about a classroom, what we tend to intuitively feel is like I'm like getting an encyclopedia of information kind of gurgitated to me, and I'm like, I'm going to store it somewhere, right? But that's only one piece of learning, or that should be only one piece of learning. There's this whole other part of the classroom experience that should be skill building, and you're going to gain skills through the assignments. At least that's how instructors should be thinking about assignments. It's not just, this is how I'm evaluating you to see if you've understood the encyclopedia, right? It's also, I'm giving you an opportunity to propose a program for the first time, or to write a grant, like things that your jobs are asking you to do. And like, I want to take this podcast, right, to say that like, you are, like, to all the students who might be watching, you are building skills, or you will build skills in an MPH program, whether or not you realize it. The one that I want to build is science communication, because public health is a field that is research intensive, as you can ask any faculty in this building and they will tell you so. But there needs to be public health practitioners, professionals who might not necessarily be interested in producing research, might not be interested in getting a PhD or doing a postdoc, but might be interested in learning how to read a scientific paper, digest it, know what's going on, but more importantly, criticize it, critically analyze it. What were its strengths? What were its weaknesses? And more importantly, how can I communicate its findings to a broader audience that might not have this skill set that I am building, right? And so something like air pollution has impacts on the lungs that are equivalent to cigarettes. That is brilliant science and very simple and straightforward science communication, but that took actually a lot of innovation, I'm sure, on whoever made that tool. And so our final project in our class is to encourage students to think about a piece of media, make it whatever you want. You could make it a children's book. You could make it, we had billboards last year. We had websites last year. We had TikTok videos last year. And it's with that goal, translate what you've learned in this classroom to a general audience. Yeah. So we're building skills, we're building knowledge.
For you, Chloe, as someone you're into your second semester, how do you think the program prepares you for the future? What makes you feel confident and certain about your next steps into the world as you graduate next year?
I think NYU is really unique with the network and the environment that it puts you in, being in New York City, but also the number of people that you meet on any given day is very unique to NYU. In any given class that I go to, we have guest speakers. The professors know so many different people that they're mentioning in lectures. I think that the network of people that you can, garner in your 2 years is the most important part of public health, because it is like a public profession. You need to be connected with a lot of different people to make an impact. This isolated idea of getting research done or publishing things in journals is not necessarily making the strides in infrastructure that need to be done for the future. It's going to be the network and the funding and the awareness, and it's going to be the communications that's actually going to change things in the future. And that's what NYU does really well, because you can learn to be a really good research scientist at NYU, but you can also learn to, be a public speaking coach, which is, a really, really important thing for people to be doing in public health, especially. We want people to be learning how to talk to people, how to criticize people, how to talk to people that they disagree with, because that is the advancement in public health that has to happen in the future for us to, live like safe and healthy and long lives.
So beautiful. Everything is public health. Public health is everything.
Yes.
So I've been saying that on all the episodes, but every single department I speak to, the same idea keeps coming up. And environmental health seems to be another great example of that as you explore it. Dr. Marrero, Chloe, thank you so much for your time and for sharing all your amazing insights and stories.
Thank you so much.
Of course. All right, folks, that was a masterclass on environmental health and also a great story on what it's like to be a professor at NYU and seeing it from their lens, and also being a student, especially that they're both in their second semester ever at this school. Thanks for tuning in. Let us know if you have any questions in the comments down below, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care, everybody.